Welcome back to another episode of the 5G Guys. I'm Wayne Smith, joined by my co-host Dan McVaugh.
Hey, Wayne. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming back. Great to have you back for another episode. Hey, before we get started, I wanted to give everyone a heads up that Wayne and I have started a weekly newsletter. Comes out every Friday. And we just sort of hit the two or three, maybe four most interesting technology topics that we see for the week. So if you're interested in checking that out in your inbox, just go to our website, 5gguys.com, hit subscribe and to the newsletter, and you'll get it in your inbox every Friday. We'll also put a link in the show notes. So speaking of interesting technology topics, we're on the back end of the annual Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And we have a guest on today who just attended that, and his name is Jim Patterson. Jim is a 30-year veteran of the telecom industry. He started his first 15 years working for Sprint, where he was part of building the award-winning wireless nationwide broadband network in the mid 90s. After that, he worked with Sprint on their business data services and was also the president of their wholesale business. After working at Sprint, he started his own company called Mobile Symmetry. Mobile Symmetry was a company that was focused on mobile identity. And he successfully grew that quickly and sold it 3 years later. Since then, he has been working under his startup Patterson advisory firm as a consultant, advisor, and uh, analyst for the telecom and technology industry. During that time, he's also served as the chief strategy officer of FastWire, which is a fiber broadband internet service company offering service in Alabama, Louisiana, Missouri, and Nebraska. So Jim has quite the breadth of knowledge and experience, and we're excited to have him with us to share with us his findings from CES this last week. Thanks for coming on, Jim.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey Jim, thanks for joining us. Give us an overview of CES, and for our listeners who are not sure what it is, kind of tell us what it's about.
Yeah, man, I'm amazed when I sit back and talk with folks, to set the show, how many people have been, it's their first or second time. It's a giant show. It's as big as everybody says it is. It takes over the entire city of Las Vegas for 4 or 5 days. It spawns what I call sub shows around media and other things. It's I've been going for 18. I've been going over 18 years. I've gone to 11 different shows. You learn a little something new at each one, right? But the biggest thing is to learn to pace yourself. So it's mammoth. It's across I think 8 different hotel venues on the Strip, plus the Las Vegas Convention Center. It's big. It's big. You'll get your steps in if you're into that. You'll definitely get your steps in. I think I do. I was only there 2 full days this year. 33,000 steps in 2 days. So a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, but it's good. You learn a lot, and you see. Um, I, I've kind of refined my approach to it. I go right to the awards. So the CES, the Consumer Electronics or CTA, Consumer Technology Association, does an award. They assess. People submit and they give a lot of awards, and some of them are rather mundane, and then some of them are really huge. And then I usually pick one or two of the keynotes. I don't go to all the keynotes. It's a lot. It takes away a lot of time from being on the floor. But there, Doug McMillon was there from Walmart this year, and they had L'Oreal as their keynote speaker. And there's a lot of different things that are going on with just regard to data and big data and how data is applied and how that impacts our lives, right? So it's a big deal. But I spend most of my time walking the floor. I'm a walk the floor kind of person. People ask me to go meet with them at CES, and I almost always try to carve out an hour or two of floor time while I'm talking with them. CES has changed a lot. When I started going, there were no cars and lots of cell phones, smartphone launches. Microsoft had a big presence. Not so much anymore. So it's much more about this very wide breadth of everything, right? I mean, it well, I think we saw our first drones in the call it 2011, 2012 timeframe. So we've been seeing them for about 10 years.
Mhm.
The cars have all started to
Yeah.
change. It's becoming kind of a real showcase for electric cars and other things.
Do you usually find that there's on for one or a couple of years in a row there's sort of some predominant themes across the show, and if so, what were those themes this year?
Well, this was it. This was the year of AI.
This episode of 5G Guys is brought to you by Vertex Innovations. For almost 20 years, Vertex has been building the nation's wireless and broadband networks. Providing project management, network engineering, and construction oversight are just some of the ways Vertex helps its clients. So if you're in need of a partner to help you with your wireless network designs, construction, implementation, or operations, reach out to Vertex. You can find them at vertex-us.com.
The ability to have machines make decisions with large quantities of data has been around for a long time. The ability to train large language models, so very large sets of hopefully highly correlated and high quality data, in order to be able to either answer questions more faster or be able to answer questions more completely, is new. And that's been going, for the last 4 or 5 years. When OpenAI was released last year, we kind of saw that there'd be a lot of new applications to it. I would say right now, AI at CES was early innings. It's new. And as a result, many times when we think about new technologies being introduced, we think, oh, it's just going to be perfect the first day I use it. Kind of like when you get your new smartphone, it's going to be just perfect first day I use it. I think the thing to learn with this, very much like when we saw the advent of the smartphone, is it's going to go through 5 to 10 years of iterations. We're going to see 5 to 10 years of iteration of AI, and things will change, and they'll be much better. Unlike a lot of technological advances we've seen in the past, I don't think it'll be free. So I think that's another thing to kind of think about. And we've always thought about, it'll just be released and it'll be free. I don't necessarily know. It'll be embedded into other things, but I think as you've seen with Copilot, as it's been introduced, it's $20 per user per month, which is a little high. But I wouldn't be surprised to see more monetization of AI as we go through.
Yeah, I think a good point, since we have a lot of listeners, and, AI it's in the news. You can't avoid it no matter what you do, whether it's in the schools or not. But since this is a consumer electronics show, did you see anything that AI would revolutionary, is revolutionary for our daily lives? Are they using it in all of the products that we normally interact with? Like, can your air fryer now have AI and do different things? Is that how they're integrating it, this phase in it, or?
The smarter refrigerator, or the, I don't know, they were introducing AI into bassinets in the innovation showcase. I'm like, I don't know. Some of the things that they were trying to do with it is a little crazy. And I think they tack on the term, just like we've tacked on smart and cloud everything. And, we tack on the term to it. But I think where it's going to really change things is just accelerating the time frame for making decisions. So yes, I do see a lot of things that'll dramatically change as a result of it. Wayne, I don't know if I'm going to say that it's, tomorrow you're going to wake up and all of a sudden everywhere you go, your face is going to be recognized, and all of a sudden it's going to automatically know what you've ordered the last 12 times you've been at that restaurant, and your menu will be highly customized just for you. No, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think there'll be a lot of changes, and subtle, right? Google, I always like to liken, Google's the master of kind of the subtle change. They'll simply change how we drive. And I'm using Google Maps as kind of the example for those of you who are big users of it. And then when they introduced Android Auto, they introduced the pervasiveness, right? So it's subtle changes like that, as they're building a very large data set of where I drive and where I go and how long it takes me to get there and whether I ran a red light.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Google's done a pretty good job of kind of being gingerly handling privacy, and we'll see kind of where that goes because privacy and AI are hand in glove.
Yeah. You touched on a couple of things that, the use of AI from a marketing standpoint that sometimes is not technically aligned with the technology of AI, I think is something for consumers to be aware of. Like, people attach AI to things that aren't using artificial intelligence at all. And I even wonder if we're going to come to a point where there's almost some regulatory oversight that says, you can't use the term AI if there's not actually artificial intelligence. But it remains to be seen. And then I think the other thing you just touched on with Google and the likes is all of this stuff, whether it's AI or not, is extremely driven by the collection of a lot of data and a lot of data about us, how we behave, where we go, how we act. And it's kind of daunting to the consumer to think about the fact that, the more I want to take advantage of these things, the more I have to be willing to open myself up to have data collected on me. And I don't necessarily even know what that data is that's being collected. And, so it's an interesting, from a consumer standpoint, sort of trade-off that we all will have to get used to.
And as you guys know, I read a column every other week called the Sunday Brief. And in last week's column, we talked at length and about the New York Times suing the parent company of ChatGPT, right? And what's fun in that is if you really read the lawsuit and you kind of look through the details of it, and it's a little mind numbing, right? You got to kind of park your brain on it for quite some time. What you find out is 20% of the language model is dependent on the quality of the New York Times historical reporting. So because they are the newspaper of record, at least they claim that title, they're driving a lot of what goes on in OpenAI, and they're like, hey, I want to get paid for that. And I don't necessarily think that's a wrong thing for them to want to do. How much they get paid for it's the subject of the negotiation. But if we trained AI simply on, third-party references and poor quality data, it'd fall flat on its face quickly. When you train it on high quality, then that's why I was going back to. You're probably gonna pay for it because you've got. If you want to get the highest quality, you're gonna have to. There's only a handful of people that are going to be able to deliver that for you. What I find interesting, just to kind of bring it back to the wireless industry and just the telecom industry in general, is, we've been collecting data in our industry for years. And we ride this fine line because I was at least, and still am, depending on the company, trained on CP&I for every year. In many cases it's an annual certification, right? So you're very sensitive to specific user information. But the more we kind of get involved with other party data sources, you kind of like, well, okay, but these guys are not telecom guys, but they're using the data in a much different manner. So I think you have to kind of balance where all that goes. The one head scratcher for me coming away from this is AT&T. So again, been around the industry, saw the whole evolution of connected car, call it from the 2005 to 2010 timeframe. And I wish AT&T had done more with the data they have on connected car. It seems like they got all the data, they grabbed all the relationships, and I'm sure they're making money off it because they're getting something for the, what we call the vehicle diagnostic portion of it. But boy, did they seem to me to have missed a very large opportunity. So I think they have something. I think the number is somewhere between 80 and 90 million cars connected today that are on the roads, and that nothing has been done with that information. And you talk about a good and solid and secure data source, that's an interesting one.
Yeah. So, back to CES. So, did you see any developments on the mobile space, with the new phones? Is anything like just grabbing your attention? You've seen all the evolutions. And so, in your career,
Yeah.
as a consumer, what do we have to look forward to? Because we've been hearing a lot about 5G. You go back to AI marketing. Hey, the telecoms have done a really good job about marketing 5G, and people still ask me, "Hey, what is 5G doing for me?" So, what did you see at CES in as far as the consumer where 5G is going to benefit their lives?
Perhaps the least used word at CES this year, surprise for me, was 5G. So there just was not a lot of 5G mentioned. Now, that could be because it's already ubiquitous. That could be because people are looking at global standards, but 5G is a global standard. That could also be because, there are other technology options that are there. One of the hottest products at the show was made by a company called Abode, and they made a camera that connects to a new generation of Wi-Fi called Halo that can actually transmit to a camera up to a mile away. And from my FastWire experience, having worked in a lot of rural environments, having anything that could connect from a home router to something very remote, say it's a feed bin or something like that, or even a more remote part of a larger farm complex, would be tremendous. Now, it's not going to communicate a lot of bandwidth, but it's enough to do pictures. And this was a 1080p camera, and the demo was incredible. So, as I said, I like to say sometimes the things that are talked about and the things that aren't talked about are important. I think what we're starting to see is there's more activity going on in certain parts of the Wi-Fi domain, which could potentially down the road, long ways down the road, represent a substitute to licensed spectrum.
Yeah. I think my take is for a while now on the podcast, Wayne and I have talked about how as we've gone through the podcast kind of along the same sort of time frame that the 5G has been introduced and it's been rolling out, is that a lot of the advantages of 5G really aren't consumer focused. Now, the carriers have tried to really do a good job of marketing 5G to their customers, but a lot of the advantages are first and foremost, and I've come to a solid conclusion on this at this point, to the benefit of the carriers. It's just allowed them to build and operate a network much more economically efficiently. The 5G core network and radio network is just they get a lot more bang for their buck. And then also we've talked about the fact that a lot of the capabilities that 5G offers really are going to be behind the scenes in the world around us, and we don't necessarily see it as a consumer. Smart cities, industrial IoT, so making the things that make our world go work better. And I think what your observation is of not a whole lot, if anything, talked about 5G at the Consumer Electronics Show is sort of sealing my prediction on that, or my assessment of that I think that's what everyone's sort of now realizing is this one just really didn't hit the consumer as much as we all had with 4G LTE. Maybe the exception to that is that there's been some advances with regard to 5G and some of the handsets and other devices out there.
Yeah, these are way down on the curve, right? So are there different operating systems that could potentially challenge Android in the future that are more secure? Yes. Are they going to be successful? I don't know. Doubt it. Has LG done a good job of using WebOS and integrated what we all knew from the Palm Pre was a pretty good OS into their core electronics? Yeah. Has Samsung done a good job on their OS of integrating Tizen into all their TVs? You betcha. I mean, they've so there's a lot of things that kind of sprouted from all the OS developments that happened, all the smartphones that happened. But I think the only thing, I'm might be generalizing a little bit here, but foldables, I can fold the camera both ways. I think that was like the one thing that I saw in the smartphones. I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. I'm able to fold a TV. I don't know if I really care about that or not. It doesn't kind of, I can't see the use case for that. But I do see the use case for large language models and data and improving the productivity and the overall experience of the user, and being able to quickly tell the user whether they really need to replace their smartphone or not based on a remote diagnostic. Mm-hmm. And this is a little bit more philosophical and probably the topic of another discussion, is where did the carriers get off track on this? And I think the issue was, and having run the early days of sprints, at that time we called it machine to machine or IoT business unit, it didn't quite have the ARPU to justify the marketing. Mm-hmm. And because it didn't have the ARPU to justify the marketing, it was a little trickier to have it be as widespread as possible. And that may or may not be the case anymore, but I think there's still a little bit of legacy thinking around that in certain areas across certain carriers. I don't think there is any carrier today that wouldn't entertain looking at all of the different applications. I think the question is, can I get 100,000 of them? Mm-hmm. Can I get 200,000 of them? Maybe not, right? And that's where I think the challenge comes to the carriers is it seems like there's a very robust ecosystem to build, smaller things, specialized things, and be able to monetize those pretty effectively. But it doesn't seem to grab the carrier's attention. It hasn't ever been able to capture the carrier's attention.
Well, you touched on something, which was the carriers being able to, open up their networks for development of apps and being semi-reluctant to that. So the analogy would be Apple with their iOS operating system has an API, an application programming interface, that allows all these companies to write applications that we all download through the App Store. Same with Android OS. And the carriers never have done that historically. They always held the key in the lockbox to getting access to applying applications and things onto their networks. I've actually seen some press now that T-Mobile and AT&T are actually developing a developer kit and an API set for people to develop applications on top of their network, directly into their network. That might be the key to really seeing consumers get a benefit out of 5G. Now, Verizon so far, I don't think has announced any indication they're going to do that, but I got to imagine they'll follow suit. So that's a huge change in the industry that it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Just to think through this, and this is a little bit more longer topic as well, is not because of the cost of 5G, but just simply because of the perceived or maybe real latency requirements that may be needed. There is a lot more offline processing, meaning much closer to, and I'll use the example that was the big hit at last year's CES, which is John Deere introduced this, I think it's a disc roller, but it's also, does different things, one of which is it detects which leaves are weeds and which leaves are the harvest crop. It's amazing. I mean, that was kind of the blow your mind, kind of thing, and only to spray herbicide on the ones that weren't the harvest crop, which are really important, right? And not just environmentally, but financially, right? Because the fertilizer costs have gone through the roof, still have gone up, I think 40% since 2019. So it's some really interesting ways to delineate that, but a lot of that intelligence actually resides on the tractor now. I mean, they're building, basically bolting on small computers that do get updated frequently, but a lot of the processing is actually done very, very locally. And I think that's another opportunity for 5G to kind of say, listen, you don't have to put all that gear on the tractor, but in order to do that, you got to make sure you have ubiquity, which is what you were just talking about.
Yeah. Listen, this has been awesome. I think we could probably go for another 15 to 30 minutes easily to talk about all the stuff you saw. I think ultimately I just need to start going to the show. I've never been myself.
It's a good show.
Yeah.
It's a great show.
Yeah. But so we really appreciate you taking time. So listen, guys, if you haven't already, go check out Jim's newsletter. Check out how to, Jim, how can people subscribe to your newsletter? How can they connect with you?
So the website is sundaybrief.com. You can just Google it, Google me, Google it. Don't Google James Patterson. You'll get a whole different set of well-authored books. But at sundaybrief.com is it. And you can sign up right there. You just put your email in and you can get it.
Yeah, if you're in the telecom industry, I highly recommend this newsletter. It's great.
So thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guys. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.